Thanks for tuning in on today's episode. I'm your host, The Patriot. So, today we have for review something that one of my biggest fans, who's a subscriber, has been waiting for this review. That being said, so we're diving into a highly requested review, and I'm so excited to finally share it with you all. At the same time, I'm really happy I could make this happen to one of my subscribers. Although it's been a little while since he requested it, folks, just to clarify one thing here, I've established a list of reviews and I'm trying to commit myself to it. With that said, since I follow my list of reviews, so for those of you in the future, if you ask about a specific review, bear in mind it's not going to happen right away. It might take some time, but rest assured it will happen. So thank you, Colton Rashford, for this review request, and I encourage all of my subscribers to share their future requests and feedback, as I genuinely appreciate the input. Now, with all that established here, let's get to the review. So today, we're reviewing one of those unique aircraft, which is the Lockheed F-104C Starfighter, in the striking colors of the United States Air Force, which makes it quite hot rod, at least to me. This unique starfighter was nicknamed Really George. Well, there is a notable history attached to this aircraft. So why does this aircraft have such a unique colors and why was nicknamed Really George? Folks, let me share some historical details about this aircraft colors. Please bear with me. So, Colonel George Lavin was a World War II ace who flew P-38s in the Pacific Theater. He later became the commander of the 479th Tactical Fighter Wing at George Air Force Base in California, which flew the Lockheed F-104C Starfighter. The 479th Tactical Fighter Wing had four subordinate squadrons, each marked with stripes of a designated color. So we have red, blue, green, or yellow. When the 479th transitioned into the F-104C, so Lockheed and Colonel Lavin's crew chief had his F-104 painted in flashes comprised of all four squadron colors, with a red fuselage, with the red tail, lightning bolts, and a red air brakes with a white and a white wall tires. Since the 479th was based at George Air Force Base and commanded by George Lavin, so Lavin's F-104C was nicknamed Really George. It likely was the most colorful United States Air Force F-104C that ever flew, and gained the ire of the Air Force brass for the flamboyant markings. But for a while, it was the hottest looking hot rod in the skies. So, consequently, the first C model accepted by Tactical Air Command took place at Annual Fighter Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, Nevada. And on October 15th, 1958, this aircraft was named Really George because its home base would be the 479th Tactical Fighter Wing at George Air Force Base. So that wraps up our discussion of the squadron background. Now let's pivot to something more fascinating, at least to me, which is the aircraft history in a nutshell. So, the story of the F-104 Starfighter started during the Korean War, following feedback from pilots who had flown in the conflict. Their consensus was clear. Aircraft had become too large and complex. As an example, like North American F-86 Sabre. So, Lockheed's response was a radical departure from this trend. The legendary Clarence Kelly Johnson toured operational units and talked with F-84 and F-86 pilots who were desperate for up-to-date hardware which could be effectively used against the far superior Soviet fighters, such as the MiG-15s. The United States Air Force was deeply concerned about the performance of the MiG-15s. The older aircraft, as I've mentioned earlier, like F-86 Sabre, were kind of inferior in terms of handling compared to more nimble fighters like those MiGs. So, what was needed was an aircraft with much greater speed, faster rate of climb, and higher operational ceiling. So, upon return to the United States, after Kelly Johnson took feedback from these pilots, so Kelly Johnson and Bill Ralston, which he was another aeronautical engineer, worked together at Lockheed and Skunk Works and went on to design an aircraft that met the requirements for the United States Air Force. So, in November 1952, Lockheed kicked off a project with a designated number 242, with a team headed by Clarence Kelly Johnson, convincing Lockheed of the validity of the concept. Johnson was granted permission by the company to continue with his project, and in the spring of 1953, these studies led to a project called the L-246. In the meantime, the United States Air Force, similarly persuaded of the value of the light air superiority fighter, issued a corresponding general operational requirement. Also, several aerospace companies took a part in the competition. For example, the Republic with what became the XF-91 and North American with NA-212, and also the Northrop with N-102. However, Lockheed proposal was by far the most sophisticated in terms of development and design. And on March 12, 1953, the company was giving an order for 2 prototypes with a designation of the XF-104. So, on April 30th, 1953, the design model was completed. So, they designed the first fighter capable of speeds of Mach 2. The aircraft entered service with the United States Air Force on January 29, 1958. Kelly Johnson completed the F-104 Starfighter project rapidly, from the initial design to first flight prototype, in approximately just 2 years. However, the entire project was accomplished in just about 5 years, which is insanely fast compared to other aircraft projects, which often take more than 25 years for a test and development cycles. For example, like the F-35 project. Further, that's an impressive work ethic. So yeah, Kelly Johnson and his team puts in a great deal of effort to finish this project fast. And there were no kidding person out there, folks. Anyway, after all that, the Lockheed F-104A Starfighter was born and would become known as the missile with a man in it. So why this name was given to the aircraft? Well, perhaps some of you are curious. Well, it's pretty obvious from a design perspective. Because of its sleek, long, thin fuselage and its short, stubby wings. However, Clarence Kelly Johnson envisioned design was clear, recognizing the necessity for a high altitude and a high speed profile, so the aircraft could surpass the performance of the Soviet MiGs. Excuse me, folks. I have to take a quick water break here. Anyway, outwardly, The Starfighter was unlike any other existing or projected designs. Nearly all the plane's equipment was packed into the fuselage, including the fuel tanks and the landing gear. With that said, so the aircraft thin wings and a short basically were not capable of holding a lot of fuel. So it was all stored in the fuselage instead. But the most unexpected feature design was the wings. With a very short wingspan and the leading edge so sharp to the point that some ground crews were complaining, they were saying like we're in a danger working in a close proximity, as it was razor sharp, at least what the United States Air Force said. The wings were about 7.5 feet long from the fuselage. Among the aircraft's many designs, so the ejection seat is one of the most interesting aircraft design features, as it operates in a unique way compared to other aircraft escape mechanisms. So the F-104 pilot was provided with a downward ejection seat because of danger from the high T-tail striking. This ejection seat was to cause a great deal of troubles as its performance did not prove satisfactory. Well, the idea was basically to avoid a collision with a aircraft tall T-tail. Folks, imagine pilot striking the tail assembly after ejecting from his aircraft. Whew, it won't be a good day. So, the early ejection seats of the 1950s may not have had enough power to get the pilot clear of the tail structure. However, in the early models of the Starfighter, particularly the A/B and the Cs, so in some scenarios, some pilots were ejecting from a very low altitudes. So the fatalities numbers was higher and very, very risky, as a seat would propel the pilot toward the ground, and consequently, they shifted to the upwards ejection seats, which were better compromised for all situations, which makes sense. Moving on, this aircraft performance was impressive for its time, breaking world records for speed and altitude, and becoming the first aircraft to exceed Mach 2. Also, the famed fighter pilot Chuck Yeager, yeah, you hear that right, pushed this aircraft to the extreme limits. Basically, he attempted to break the altitude records. He flew the specialized version called an F-104A, which was in December 1963. But unfortunately, there was a mishap. The aircraft crashed after it entered a flat spin while attempting to break the altitude record. The NF-104A was a modified Starfighter equipped with a rocket engine specifically designed by Lockheed Martin for a zoom climb. This modified version was extensively used for research and record attempts. Although the F-104 Starfighter had a high accident rates, which incidentally earned it the second nickname, which is the Widowmaker. This was due to a combination of factors, including the aircraft's unforgiving handling characteristics. Well, the early engine problems and the fact that some operators, like Germany, used it for rules beyond its original design, often in a poor weather conditions and at a low altitudes. Also, the other contributing factor was the inexperienced pilots. So, Germany had a significant number of these aircraft in service with the Luftwaffe. However, the German F-104 Starfighter problem, the problem was basically with the German Air Force. They had a very high number of accidents, basically resulting in, I'm trying to remember here, folks. They claimed that nearly 300 aircraft lost and 116 pilots killed between 1961 and 1989. And this is why the aircraft was given the second nickname, which is the Widowmaker. So Germany, the problem was Germany adapted this aircraft as a multi-role fighter, which the aircraft was not originally designed for that purpose, which was a, shall we say, a strategic miscalculation. Moving on, so why this aircraft had a notorious engine problems. Let's cover some of that elements here. So the problem was the F-104 was on the cutting edge of aviation technology, and the early models of the General Electric, the J79 turbojet engine, had a reliability issues, such as by overheating in the compressor section, a direct result of using materials like magnesium and alloys, which have poor high temperature oxidation resistance. However, while many minor issues were eventually addressed, so the engine was, shall we say, the fatal flaw in the F-104 safety record. Furthermore, I had to take another water break, folks. Sorry. So, furthermore, other problems slash drawbacks were identified during the initial production phase related to 20 millimeter the M61 Vulcan cannon. So the aircraft was originally equipped with the fast rotary cannon, which is great. So the initial F-104 Starfighters had issues primarily with its linked ammunition feed system, which was prone to misfeeds, jams, and created a foreign objects, particularly causing interior damage. Also, a significant gas buildup. But the good thing is the engineers, they fixed those problems in a timely manner. However, after a few tests over Mojave Desert, the gun proved its reliability. Also, it's worth noting that the aircraft was designed and intended to fight against the Soviet fighters, right? But the fact that this aircraft did not fight extensively in actual combat probably never saw combat in its design capacity. But it was eventually relegated to, let's say, interceptor, good interceptor, being a reconnaissance platform and a research and development. Well, the other reason the aircraft didn't fight against the Soviet MiGs is because of differences in their operational timelines. This is one of the reasons, folks. Although the F-104 can be considered as an excellent aircraft, however, troubles with the engine hampered the A and the B models, while extra weight added on the G variant um, caused many accidents and gave the plane a reputation of being dangerous to fly, partly because of the Starfighter's problems and realization that it took more than sheer speed and exceptional operational ceiling to make an outstanding interceptor. The United States Air Force deployed the F-104A and the B variants for only a year, while the aircraft had a relatively short and limited career with the United States Air Force. So the United States Air Force procured a total of 296 F-104s, including both the single-seat and the two-seater variants. And that number basically puts the United States at the least operator, just because, as I've mentioned earlier, the issues with the J79 engine, which limited its long-term role in the United States Air Force, but in contrast, other nations operated significantly larger fleets. That being said, for example, West Germany was the single largest operator with total of 915 F-104s, serving with the Luftwaffe and the Navy as well. And speaking about the other operators, such as Japan, Canada, Italy, Spain, Jordan. Well, surprisingly, Jordan operate those starfighters. Pakistan, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Greece, Taiwan, and Turkey. So yeah, the F-104 did, however, enjoy spectacular commercial success abroad and were still operational 30 years after the missile with a man in it made its maiden flight on March 4th, 1954. The Lockheed F-104 soared into the skies for its maiden flight, basically marking the debut of one of the most iconic fighter aircraft of the Cold War, designed as a supersonic interceptor participating in various Cold War era conflicts. This aircraft was also deployed during the 1961 the Berlin crisis, and also the 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis as a deterrent platform, and of course uh, in the Vietnam Wars was participated as an escort fighter and for doing a close air support, acting as a big eye in the skies, much like a radar warning because of its speed. And its speed was considered an asset for keeping up with the strike packages and protecting assets operating near the North Vietnamese coast. Also, the aircraft was extensively used as a fighter bomber throughout the Cold War. Its distinctive shape set it apart from the other single engine aircraft of the era, with a long, pencil like a fuselage and short anhedral wings, capped with a large tip tanks and a T-tail. Also, the Starfighter bore a striking resemblance to the spacecraft being developed at the same time. So, in the military service today, this aircraft was being retired from military use, and so far by all nations, with Italy being the last operator to retire it, and I believe in 2004. Correct me if I botch in any of that, folks. I'm always happy with any kind of input. However, the F-104 is still flown by private companies for civilian and government missions, primarily for upper atmosphere research and testing. And it's worth noting that beyond military applications, also this aircraft has been used by NASA for quite some time for supporting their research missions. However, the final flight of the F-104 for NASA was in February 1994. Further, I think this aircraft was a significant leap in aviation technology at the time. It was the first production aircraft in the world to achieve Mach 2, or sustaining Mach 2, I should say, which is twice the speed of sound. Also in the level flight, and the first to hold world records for airspeed slash altitude and time to climb simultaneously. So realistically, the F-104 was not the very first aircraft to achieve Mach 2. However, there is a common misconception here. So many aviation enthusiasts out there say that this aircraft was the first to achieve that speed, but they're mistaken. Well, the Bell X2 was the first aircraft to break Mach 2, which was back in 1956. So the Bell X2 was a rocket-powered swept-wing research aircraft basically designed to investigate the structural effects of the aerodynamics. But that's a bit of digression here. Anyway, I believe this aircraft is considered both a historical and iconic aircraft, known for its revolutionary design and very controversial service record. A notable design characteristic which I really like is the key design features of this aircraft is the sophisticated air intakes, known as supersonic inlets, or the supersonic diffusers, which are the essential for managing the airflow and allowing it to fly at such incredible speeds. So to me, it's just a fantastic looking aircraft, folks. I'm a huge fan of this aircraft. But anyway, since we've covered the history, let's get to the model impressions. Now, this model is from Hobbymaster in 1/72nd scale with a model number HA1001. Folks, honestly, I don't know where to begin. So this model has been in my collection for years and years, to the point that I've completely lost track of time. Um, the other interesting thing is that this model was the very first die-cast model from Hobbymaster, which I believe this release came out in the late 2008. That being said, it's a very, very rare model. So as per usual, I'm trying my hardest to cover models that are easily obtainable so you guys can hop up there and pull up your credit card and just buy it. But honestly, with such a massive collection, it's just hard to keep everything updated. But we're making an exception today to review this timeless, beautiful model. So check out this, folks. My journey to put my hands on this specific model began, I want to say, 15 years ago. So at that point, I tried to build this model as a model kit, but I found that building a model kit with this specific paint scheme, which I was looking for, this was my favorite paint scheme on the F-104 Starfighter, I thought it would be an extraordinary difficult to achieve, and not to mention time consuming. True confession, I've only built a few models, but they were kind of easily for me because, so here's the thing. I know this is something I haven't shared with you all previously, so I'm a painter slash artist. Folks, I have other hobbies besides military aviation and flying. I like drawing human faces and a wide array of subjects from anything you could imagine, hoping that I can share some of these with you guys in the future videos. Anyway, coming back to the model story, so not to mention there weren't many kits available at the time, especially being in 1/72nd scale. So every so often, grab a drink, grab my chair, get a little comfortable at my computer, watching for the latest things and what Hobbymaster has in the pipeline, etc. So while I was checking, I saw Hobbymaster announce that they were producing a die-cast version of this specific paint scheme, and with this exact livery. And the news hit me like a ton of bricks. It just hit me like a lightning bolt from Zeus himself, because it was exactly what I had been waiting for such a long time. And to me, that was relief more than anything. And since I knew that Hobbymaster was eventually going to produce this model, I decided to, cancel my project of building as a model kit. So yeah, that was a quiet story to get to the first model of the F-104 Starfighter. But I want you to know it was worth it. I apologize, folks. I know I've been rambling a bit and losing focus on the main elements of the model. Now let's focus on the model details. So this model is very well made, but I don't really think that I'll be able to capture the craftsmanship of this model. I mean, the paint quality is just flawless, and hoping my camera did her justice to capture the true beauty of this model. And I'm really struck by the consistency of those multi-colors. Basically, there's no blotches or washed out colors, very crisp and clear. Overall, the shape of this model is very well done and true to the real aircraft. For example, the supersonic air intakes, also the anhedral wings, basically are angled downwards, Glad to see Hobbymaster capture those details precisely. Also, I really like the unit identification markings, such as the ones on the tail. I like the Tactical Air Command. All serial numbers are great. Um, I mean, overall, the detailing is on the money. I mean, in terms of accessories that comes with this model, it's fairly simple. It comes with two AIM-9B sidewinders, air-to-air missiles, and two fuel tanks basically are mounted on the wingtips. Surprisingly, this specific release didn't come with pilot figuring. I'm not sure why. I mean, I bought this model brand new, untouched. Uh, I'm assuming possibly because it was part of the initial production run and pilot figures weren't ready yet. Anyway, the pitot tube comes separately in the box, which is fairly easy to install. Also, I really like the canopy system design, specifically the way the glass pieces are movable, so you can completely remove them. However, since this version is a single seat, so it doesn't come with a whole lot of pieces. But I'm assuming that the two-seater variant, it comes with multiple pieces. And I will say this is a very intuitive design by Hobbymaster, so kudos to Hobbymaster. Also, the stand is included for airborne configurations. Now let's move on to the landing gear assembly of this model. It might sound a little persnickety, but Hobbymaster did include the instructions, which really made the installation much easier. That being said, if you follow the instructions, there will be no fuss, no muss, and surprisingly, very adorable landing gear. Even if you feel like you're going to break something, but they never breaks. So all things are considered here. Now, I will say the only catch is extreme rarity, since Hobbymaster hasn't put out many Starfighters, particularly in the U.S. Air Force colors. As the current range is not very extensive with the F-104s, and I earnestly hope that Hobbymaster will consider more releases in the future, especially in the U.S. Air Force colors. While there are some Starfighters selling on the secondary market with inflated prices, which I don't recommend anyone buying them, especially the ones in the official U.S. Air Force colors. However, there are quite several. Several other releases available, and the prices are quite reasonable. As I've mentioned earlier, I'm really interested to see more releases from Hobbymaster so I can pull a trigger on them and throw them on the channel, right? I'll give it a good hunch though. So suffice to say, it's a beautiful model. If you really like and if you're really interested in this particular example, and if you can find one, of course, it's going to be on the secondary market. I mean, if you're within the budget and you don't mind to spend 300 or more, all I can tell you, congratulations. um, or save your money and just wait for a subsequent releases. I mean, who knows, right? On that note, I'm glad to have this marvel in my collection, and I'm even happier to share both the aircraft history and the model with you all. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching. Leave your questions, comments in the appropriate section below. If you like this video, make sure to like it. That way you let the algorithm know that people are engaging with my content. And please subscribe. That way I have a measurement of how good or how bad I might be doing here. And I always say this, there's always room to improve. While I'm pleased with my current results. So yeah, that's that. That's pretty much the end of my signature here. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.